Well, thanks very much, David. It's really a great pleasure for me to be able to introduce my governor. As I told you earlier in the last session, I'm Don Alper from Western Washington University and the director of the Border Policy Research Institute. So it's a special treat to be at the conference, to be part of the organization of the conference, but also to be able to introduce my governor. Governor Chris Gregoire became Washington's 22nd governor in 2005. She was reelected last year in 2008. Prior to serving as governor, she served 3 terms as Attorney General. In fact, the first woman to be elected to that position in Washington state history. Following many accomplishments and firsts, she was named the most influential Attorney General in the nation by the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. This had to do with a major tobacco lawsuit that Governor Gregoire was involved in at the time. Earlier, prior to being Attorney General, she served as director of the Washington Department of the Ecology, where she negotiated, among other things, the safe cleanup of nuclear waste at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. Governor Gregoire has a national reputation for her strong commitment to education, children's health insurance, and job training, just to mention a few. In the world of Canada-U.S. relations, Governor Gregoire has become a stalwart supporter of high-profile and exceptionally innovative regional cross-border initiatives, which include the Puget Sound Partnership, a major environmental initiative linking the marine commons between British Columbia and Washington State, the enhanced driver's license, which you heard about this morning and probably will hear a bit more about during her talk, a major bilateral emergency management initiative between British Columbia and Washington, and regular summit meetings between herself and British Columbia Premier Gordon Campbell. I think it's true to say that the comment that was made by Sukumar Parawal this morning about how do you get good executive cross-border cooperation relies on alignment of values and a sense of shared trust. And clearly, Governor Gregoire and her counterpart in British Columbia have met those tests. Governor Gregoire graduated from the University of Washington, and she received her law degree from Gonzaga University. Go Zags. She and her husband, Mike, have 2 daughters, Courtney and Michelle. Please join me in welcoming Governor Chris Gregoire.
Well, thank you very much. For those of you not familiar with Western Washington University, it is, I will say in a very unbiased way, one of the finest universities anywhere. So congratulations and thank you for that fine introduction. I am pleased to be here, especially to talk about something that is so vital to my area of the country, and all of you are here for the same reason, and that is our economy is not driven by my state alone. It really is very dependent and very supportive of a regional economy, which includes our counterparts to the north. And I want to say, first of all, we have had an amazing partnership. We are helping out each other on both sides of the border. In fact, we are constantly looking at what are the obstacles to enhancing our regional cooperation and particularly our respective economies, and how do we strengthen our relationship so it lasts beyond our personal relationship. More than 7 million jobs in the United States and 3 million in Canada really depend on whether that Canadian-U.S. border and its relationship is working well. The communities on both sides of the border have a very strong interest in ensuring that the border remains open and it remains convenient for them to make the kind of legitimate travel they want to engage in. So all of us, whether we're Canadian or American, have a vital interest in making sure that we meet that criteria for our respective citizens. I took office 4 years ago, a little bit over 4 years ago, and immediately began working with my counterpart in British Columbia. You may ask, why was that a priority of mine? And I will tell you a personal story that led to it. Shortly after being named the director of the Department of Ecology in the state of Washington, we had an oil spill off our coast. A decision was made to push the vessel out, believing that the tide would take the oil out. The tide took the oil north, and it landed on the beaches of our friends to the north in Canada, in British Columbia. And immediately there was this uproar about, was it done intentionally to avoid the oil landing on the shores of Washington State? That began my relationship with my counterpart in environmental protection in British Columbia. And out of that stressful situation grew an amazing partnership that was precedent-setting. And we started the state's British Columbia Task Force on Oil Spill Prevention. We did joint operations together. That led us to talk about other things like, guess what? The air doesn't understand the border. Water doesn't understand the border. Pollution doesn't understand the border. So let's continue to work together. So that was a great experience that I had, and I took it into my new role as Attorney General and invited the Attorney General of British Columbia to come meet with me, and I went up to meet with him. That then led to the Western Attorneys General inviting the Attorneys General of Canada to join us on an annual basis to talk about mutual issues. My point is, this has been a long-standing relationship. So when I took office, I immediately made a call to the Premier and said, how can we work together? We struck up a bit of a personal friendship, and from that we said, let's exchange a cabinet meeting on an annual basis. And so it began. So every year, for the last 3 years now, I will take my cabinet to British Columbia, or the Premier will bring his cabinet down to my state, and we will talk about every conceivable issue you can imagine. Because again, that border does not know that there's any division there. First press conference, we happened to meet first time in British Columbia. And someone in their media there asked me how I felt about the relationship between Washington State and British Columbia. And I said, we are more than neighbors, we are best friends. And that will be the driving understanding in our relationship in everything we do. And it's because of that that I think we really have forged an amazing partnership. If you have a doubt, how in the world would you ever believe that a state like Washington could drive through the federal bureaucracy the enhanced driver's license? And I will tell you how that conversation began. In fact, it was June 20th. It was 2006. We were having one of our first meetings, and the question was, how can we help you be successful in the 2010 Olympics? Well, you can imagine what Gordy said to me. Well, you can help by not making the border a barrier. And by what you're doing in America, with either Whitty or all the other related issues, you are going to hamper travel coming across that border. And we've done a study, and through that study we've discovered that the promise of what can happen in that 2010 Olympics for us will be reduced by about 30% if we can't solve how that border will work. As people fly in to Seattle-Tacoma Airport and drive up, or come from California and drive up, or however they may choose to do it, or come from Canada back to enjoy Washington State as they leave from their experience at the Olympics. So out of that we said, surely there must be another way, a less expensive way, a good way. Now, remember, we are the only border that has ever stopped a terrorist. And we didn't stop that terrorist, just for the record, we didn't stop it because we had some grand new technology. We didn't stop that terrorist because we had some specific thing that would detect. We stopped that terrorist because that individual at the border crossing was well trained and knew something was wrong and began to dig and dig deeper, and that resulted in that arrest. So we've got that skilled, trained workforce. We know the risks, but we also know if we don't open up that border to our best friends to the north, that we're going to damage our economy and our relationship. Washingtonians don't go out and get a passport like they're going to a foreign country. As far as they're concerned, it's a day trip. They want to go see hockey. They want to go shopping. They want to go to some entertainment for a day. And the idea that we're going to stop them at that border with either a huge backup or a requirement that costs them money when they've got a very large family was going to jeopardize the ability for those 2010 Olympics to be successful. So out of that grew this, surely we can find a driver's license that would be very convenient to your citizens to get, absolutely secure, but that will allow them to cross the border in a much more easy way. And out of that came the enhanced driver's license. Now, it wasn't easy. I don't want you to think that in a million years. I assigned it to my head of the Department of Licensing. At last count, she'd been to 60 federal agencies. That's a 6-0, just in case you missed what I said. I came back here, I remember very distinctly, to tie the ribbon and get it all done. Happened to have dinner with Secretary Chertoff, in which it was all done, and we had an appointment to meet the next day to shake hands and go forward. But earlier in the morning, I was to meet with folks over at the State Department for breakfast. So I figured that we would just shake hands over there, and only to be found that no, they weren't interested and it wasn't going to happen after all of this effort. So then I proceeded to go ahead with my appointment over with Secretary Chertoff, informed him what had happened at the State Department. He said, stand right here, I'm going to get somebody on the line. And of course it was the Secretary of State that he got on the line, Secretary of State Rice. So she got on the line and he said, I don't know what the problem is and I don't know what the barrier is, but I want to hear from you to Governor Gregoire that in fact we're going to make this happen. She said, we're going to make this happen. I said, I'm going to assume by this call I'm shaking your hand. She said, you can. I shook his hand, and that's how we made it happen. So it wasn't easy, but I'll bet you we've broken the barrier now so that we can have a greater trusting relationship with our federal agencies about some of the issues that we face and how we can be the laboratory of experimentation and find ways to solve those problems. And because of our work and what we've been able to accomplish, of course, they have the enhanced driver's license now in British Columbia. Other states are joining us, and they're not just northern border states. They are southern states as well. And I know that the new Secretary of Homeland Security from Arizona had already stepped up and said she wanted to initiate an enhanced driver's license in Arizona. So I have no fear that we're going to continue to make this possible. That enhanced driver's license, by the way, I happen to have one. So if you have not, and I assume no one in the room has had the experience. Has anybody had the experience? One, you go in and you get your driver's license, but it results in an interview that you otherwise wouldn't have, which is fairly thorough. And in the end, let me just say what I think about it. I actually think that my enhanced driver's license is better than any other form of identification, to include a passport, by the specificity with which I secured my enhanced driver's license. I was the first one outside the agency to do it. I wasn't treated any differently than anybody else. But those people who did that interview have been trained. They have been trained how to detect, trained just like that person at that border was trained. So I actually feel that that piece of identification is more secure, not less secure. And therefore, I think it is the exact way to go. Much easier to get, much more timely to get, and a whole lot cheaper to get. And right now, with the economy as it is, that rings true to anybody I know. So that's an example of our working relationship. But it goes well beyond that. For example, we both have, British Columbia and our state, the ocean. And so we've begun now, Washington, Oregon, California, British Columbia, to work on our ocean, to ask what we can do. You know, the fisheries resource that is important to British Columbia is equally important to the 3 states to the south, so we're working on that. One of the most other precedent-setting kind of relationships we've had is with regard to global climate change. I issued an executive order saying we were going to work on global climate change. And I remember at that press conference, the question was asked of me, what can one little state do? I thought for a moment, how does one respond to that question when you're thinking of global climate change? And I said, lead. I got a call from Gordie Campbell, said, we want to join you. We went from that small beginning to now 7 states and 4 provinces joined together on how can we move forward to address that issue of global climate change. Again, precedent setting, was mentioned very specifically in a call out by the President in a meeting with all the governors yesterday at the White House. So I think our relationship is duplicated, candidly, with any other state and any other province in Canada. But again, it's how we view our relationship. That border is a fiction. We are really great neighbors, but we are great friends. And we need to see this opportunity and seize every opportunity we can to break down barriers and look at opportunities. And I want to make sure that Premier Campbell has one of the most successful Winter Olympics in the history of our country. So we began to work on that as well. My predecessor, as you well know, had put together the Olympic Coordination Center on the United States side of the border to make sure that we had addressed any of the security issues. It was originally envisioned that this would respond to any incident that might happen at the border to make sure that the experience at the Olympics was going to be a good one for anybody who passed through. So the Royal Canadian Mounted Police began planning for the Games, and then we said, you know, it's one thing to plan, it's another thing to execute. And so now we will have the presence of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Bellingham with us, a representative that will be located at the center throughout the duration of the Games. That will allow everyone, I think, to ensure not only planning but execution that is safe and secure. We want mobility, we want trade, we want people with enhanced driver's license to go through a designated lane so they get through in a much quicker way than anybody else, to encourage people to get those enhanced driver's license. And with that, we think we're going to be able to make sure that that happens and people feel good about attending the Games. Now, we put together about $200 million in enhancements to our port to make sure in leading up to the Olympics that that border crossing is going to be one that is efficient and effective as possible. But just this last week, to show you how good we feel about it, I got a letter from the Premier, and as the torch passes through Canada, east to west, one of its last places and only time that it will cross into the United States will be at the Peace Arch in Bellingham, Washington, where we'll have a ceremony celebrating British Columbia and Canada and those Olympics and their emphasis on green and our partnership on green and a green economy. I think this will be an opportunity for us to show not only our friends in Canada, but our fellow Americans, but the world, what it's like to have the kind of relationship we do between our province and our state and our two countries. We have a new partner in this endeavor in President Obama. It's very clear he gets it, he understands. Why was the first choice of all travel that he could have made to go to Canada? He's made it very clear. This is going to be a relationship of a good friend, a great friend. And so with that, I am really looking forward to us continuing to have our great annual meetings, for us to show what it means to have a great relationship, not just our two countries, but the rest of the world. I love the signs. For those of us in the United States, I love the signs that were put up to greet President Obama in Canada. For those of you who didn't happen to see them, they said, "Yes, we Canada." So, I think that's very fun and shows the kind of fun relationship we can have as well. So I look forward to working with all of my friends in Canada in every one of the provinces. I particularly enjoy my relationship with Premier Campbell. And just to show you how surprising our relationship is, when we meet, I didn't understand that no one, absolutely no one, refers to Premier Gordie Campbell as anything other than Premier Campbell. And no one back home refers to me as anything other than Governor Gregoire. I talk to him as Gordie, and he calls me Chris, and everybody just is amazed at that. So those are good friends, and that's our relationship. So in the coming years, I look forward to it. But Gordie and I have talked about, we want it to be sustained. When I'm no longer there, he's no longer there, we don't want to see any diminution in our relationship. It must survive us, it must be enhanced, and this meeting and what you do is going to make that possible. So thank you for inviting me today. Thank you for your continued efforts. Let's keep working together and making it even greater than what we have in the past. Thank you and congratulations.
Governor, it's a real privilege to follow you up at the podium. And on behalf of Premier Campbell, I'd like to thank you for the enormous friendship that you have with him and the relationship you've built between Washington and British Columbia. It's been a treat to be involved in helping support you with the joint cabinet meetings, and it's a privilege to be here with you. The Premier wasn't able to make it, as I say, the Premier, wasn't able to make it today because we have our legislature in session, and as you know, in our system, he's the legislator as well. This is the last legislative session before the election on May 12th in British Columbia, so it's a particularly important session, and so he wasn't able to make it. He did ask for his personal regards to be conveyed to you, and he also sent a video, which I'd like for us to show to you.
Hi, I'm Gordon Campbell, Premier of British Columbia. I'm sorry I can't be with you today because I'm a strong proponent of building partnership across our country and across our borders. We all recognize that we're facing challenging and difficult economic times, and that's why cooperation across borders is even more important. In 353 days, the 2010 Winter Olympic and Paralympic Games will be in Vancouver and Whistler, and they'll provide a huge economic stimulus for the entire Pacific Northwest. BC and Washington State have already worked together on border solutions, like the enhanced driver's license that strengthens security while facilitating the flow of legitimate trade and travel. That type of cooperation can be a model for both our countries, our provinces, and our states. We have to take down barriers that cost both of our economies and ensure that we get our border security right, so that we maintain not just safe and secure North America, but an economically strong and competitive North America. We need to balance safety and security with lowering costs for business and consumers. We need to keep working on increasing our flow of trade, knowing that we are both trade-based economies. A time of economic challenge is exactly the right time to increase our trade, to build our domestic markets in the United States and Canada by embracing free trade that is smart and that moves our economies in Washington and British Columbia, the Northwest, and Canada and the United States forward. We can work together. We can tackle issues that we have in common, like addressing climate change while boosting our economies. As long as we commit to continuing to work together, to building partnerships, we'll both emerge from the current economic challenges even stronger than when we went in.
Ladies and gentlemen, listening to the Governor and listening to the Premier, again, I'd like to reiterate the sense I have of the shared values in that relationship. Thank you very much. Enjoy your lunch.